Welcome to The Founder's Mind, a podcast powered by the Kadar Group. This is your host, Adam Muchler. On this episode, we have Ruben Harris, founder and CEO of Career Karma. Listen in as Ruben shares how he broke into the tech world without a tech background, how he's building a path for others to do the same, and the parallels he sees of playing cello and being in the business world. Well, Ruben, welcome to The Founder's Mind.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being on the show. I'm excited to chat.
Me too.
I did a little internet sleuthing, so I knew enough to sort of start off the conversation. But the truth was, after going through LinkedIn and just kind of reading all the links and seeing all the things that you've done, I feel like I would botch it if I tried to tell your story.
Yeah.
So it'd be cool to hear from you a little bit about what you've been up to and what you're working on and focusing on right now, because the list is long.
The list is long. I think right now, there's definitely a one-liner that we say about what Career Karma does to investors and to customers and to users, whatever. But essentially, fundamentally, right now, what Career Karma is a social network for people becoming software engineers through coding bootcamps. And the reason why we started with coding bootcamps is because they're the first institution that took income share agreements at scale and have helped tens of thousands of people get employed without putting them in debt. And the reason why that's important is because workforce development is one of the most, if not the economic issue of our time. It's a massive problem. You can't build these big organizations without talent. And most people aren't doing what they love. And so we essentially are helping people do what they love without having to go into debt at scale. And the reason why we're doing it is because we did coding bootcamps at the beginning of the industry around 2013, 2014. And then interviewed several people that were able to get jobs as software engineers outside of college. And if you think about technology taking over every single industry, the universal language of the industry is code. And before getting into technology, and me and my co-founders, we met in Atlanta, Georgia. We were in the finance world. We worked at 6 different companies in total. I worked at Alt School, Honor, Hustle. My co-founder was at Funding Circle all the way until IPO. The other one was at Auto Trader and Blipper. And then before that, I was a professional cellist. And so when I think about the cello and technology, music is also a universal language globally. And so as a musician, I'm able to communicate with the world. If I'm a coder, I can communicate with the world. And as an artist, we have to constantly reinvent ourselves in any environment. And so today, where we are, we have entered into the end of occupational identity, where you can't just say, I'm a doctor or a lawyer forever anymore. You might be a doctor for a few years. You might be a lawyer for a few years. You might be an engineer for a few years. And it's awesome because you can do multiple things, but you're going to have to go to multiple schools and multiple companies to figure that out. And so I think it's a very special time because we could educate people at scale. We can do what we love. We can pay our own bills. We could work from anywhere. We could be podcasters and make money. We can be commentators on games, and you can't predict what these jobs are going to be in the future. And so I think that's the long version of my story. That's also concise.
That is not the definition of an elevator pitch, but it's helpful.
Exactly.
For the purpose of this conversation.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
How did you? I actually played cello for a little bit. I did not play it for as long as you. I didn't play it anywhere near as long as you, but I played it 3rd through 6th or 7th grade, and then we could do jazz, and I picked up the clarinet and the saxophone and stuff like that. I think that's really interesting. You don't hear a lot of people that are playing that have this skill, cello or violin or something like that, unless you're literally still actively a musician. And that's your 100% jam. I love the connection there between the instrument and some of the work that you're doing. Can you talk a little bit more about that? How did you pick up the cello and stick with the cello? You took it all the way through college. It looks like you
Mm-hmm.
got
Mm-hmm.
a degree
Mm-hmm.
in music.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I did double major in business administration and music, and I still play cello today. Um, when you think about music, so it started in Montessori school. So I went to Montessori school. There's actually a Montessori mafia. I think you can find it in Wall Street Journal. Like the founders of Google, like a bunch of people, like all went to Montessori school. Um,
Do
about
they face off with the PayPal mafia, or is that different?
they don't face off, but it's similar. Like it's actually very. It's the only reason I don't think they face off is because they didn't all work at the same company. But it's pretty
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
interesting, because my mom's a psychologist, and she's done a lot of things around learning through play, and learning skills through play. Um, and what's interesting about the way I got into cello is the teacher when I was 4 years old was only offering violin lessons. My mother asked if she teaches anything else, and she happened to also teach cello. Her name's Bonnie Bull, and I started through something called the Suzuki method.
Yeah, yeah. I'm
And
familiar.
yeah, and what's cool about the Suzuki method is they don't believe in prodigies. They believe that every child can, and that you should learn how to speak before you learn how to read, just like English. So you should learn how to play before you learn music theory, which is also very similar to coding boot camps. You learn how to code, and then on the job you learn the theory. Like you learn what's practical on the job. And so, what's interesting about learning through play, especially for children, is that they rise to the occasion to do things that are difficult because they don't know that they're supposed to be hard.
Yeah, yeah.
And so when you present something in front of them, like learning Japanese or learning an instrument, or like if a child has a Japanese mother, a Latino Latinx father, and a grandmother that speaks English, that child will learn all three languages before they could tie their shoes. Um, and throughout my life, I've actually kept the principles that my parents gave me around music and play, where they wanted to give things that nobody could take away from us but ourselves, which was language and music, because my first language is Spanish. And if you stop practicing, you lose it. And so growing up, it was all about practice. I never thought that anything was impossible. I just recognized that it took work. It took um, practice every day, setting a stretch goal every week. If you are in a state of comfort, that means your body is telling you that you are ready to push harder. And then you wanted to make sure that you don't practice things over and over again um, wrong. You want to focus on the problem spots, get better at those, and then like continue to iterate. It's like the Bruce Lee thing. It was like, I'd rather not fight the man that knows 10,000 kicks, but the one that practices one kick 10,000 times. And so
Mm.
I wrote a blog in college called like Why Learning an Instrument is More Than Music. And we can go deeper on that, but I think like those are the main principles right there.
Well, I went to a Waldorf school K through 12, and when
Mm-hmm.
I tell people I went to Waldorf, they're like, "Oh, is that like Montessori?"
Mm-hmm.
Um, and they're not the same,
Mm-hmm.
but they're similar. There's some similar principles: a lot of outdoor time, a lot of play time, a lot of music.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we use, I mean, the Suzuki method is something that is introduced, by a lot of teachers in music at the Waldorf school. And but one of the things that you brought up, which I think is amazing, and I have a 6 month old son now,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm observing him every day. And one of the biggest questions that have come to my mind is, when do we lose the innate curiosity and
Mm-hmm.
learning skills
Mm-hmm.
that children have?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
you just talked about it. Um, but there is this, and I think it's somewhere in grade school. Could even be as early as kindergarten, depending on how structured it is.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
the moment kids start to learn and feel like they're being taught to like a test as a result or an outcome,
Mm-hmm.
then my this is my completely non-professional, only experiential and observational opinion. But to your point of kids learning how to speak three languages before they can tie their shoes, kids also learn really quickly how they should be learning to be rewarded or to succeed in whatever framework they're given.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, So I think that's really cool that not only were you put into this environment, the Montessori school, and clearly had a, a meaningful impact on you and introduced to music as well, but those tenets of, practice, hard work, making mistakes, and like we talk about in startups, there's a lot about like iteration and experimenting, and that's what learning is.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think something that you brought up about like when you lose that creativity is the I posted something this morning talking about how the creative adult is a child who survived, right? And so like if you figure out how to keep that keep that mindset, but at the same
Yeah.
time mature over time, there's that's why I think there's something to say about like gaming. There are positive aspects that you learn from gaming. I learned a lot of things through gaming. I actually used to be a big gamer, like Counter Strike back in the day. I don't do that now because I don't really have as much time as I used to
Yeah.
when
Now
I was
you
younger.
can't be consuming that
But I
content.
think
You got
that
to be
like
producing that content.
yeah, exactly. We shifted here, and so but I think I really like what you're bringing up because like as you're starting to learn how to test, as you start to be um, introduce yourself, like we talked about at the end of occupational identity, you start taking on different like characteristics to present yourself. Like I went to this school, I work for this company, I do this job, I make this much money, right? All those things start to define you. But something else I think about is like how adults do a better job of pretending than children do, right? So it's like this dichotomy, right? And so like if you're able to actually do away with the definition of who you are based off of how much money you make and where you work and what you do, like there's ways to create streams of income out of anything. It actually matters less about where you went to school. It matters more about what you do and what you know how to produce versus like what you know how to consume. And so I think it's a very interesting time. And I think that like technology is going to continue to do a good job of wiping away um, work that's repetitive. And we're going to have to increasingly get more and more creative. And that's why it's really, really important to focus on our creativity and our ability to like express ourselves.
This is make I've got so many things coming to my mind, so I'm going to try and focus. But really, what's coming up right now, and this is something I've talked to, in my personal circles and some professional circles, which is I like to say the future is human for this one main reason you said it
I like
is
that.
leaning into the things that make us human. And
Mm-hmm.
part of that, and a big part of that, is creativity. One of the guests, one of the first guests actually, Alan Gennett, he wrote a book called The Creative Curve, and he talks about creativity. And his examples are these people that were maniacally focused on their craft. They weren't
Mm-hmm.
like it wasn't like an accidental moment of creativity. It's like they were building an expertise or a skill set at an unbelievable rate, and because of that, they were able to have these creative moments. Um, but I think that that's such a it's you said it, doing things more like looking at creativity and being more creative and thinking creatively. And when I look at the work that I do with executive coaching and leadership work and how people work together, maybe I'm a little optimistic here, but I feel that the things that make us the most human, relationships, being like curiosity, being creative, being innovative, those are the least uh those are the skills that machines can replicate the least. At least for the longest period of time. Maybe one day they get there,
Yeah.
but not
Yeah.
not in the near term.
Yeah. I mean, I love what you said about like leaning into what makes us human. Right. Like one of the first questions that I ask people when they join Career Karma, if they want to speak with me directly, is like, you know, why do you want to learn how to code? Like, what, if pretend that you had all the money in the world to pay your bills, like, what kind of work would you be doing? Right? Like, what do you think your purpose is? Like, a lot of people haven't answered that question. Like, most people's goals is to make a lot of money. But once you've solved all your problems from a basic needs perspective or being able to take care of your family forever, why do you work? what work gives you meaning. I think we are all blessed with different gifts, and like we can put those things back out into the world, and like we get value out of that. But it's not just as individuals, like you said, it's these relationships, right? It's not just relationships to like use each other to get to our own individual goals. Like nobody wants to be lonely at the top, right? We want to do things together, right? You don't want to be like rich and retired by yourself, right? With nobody to share it with. Maybe some people do, but I would argue a few people, like a large number of people actually don't. And so I really like what you said about leaning into what makes us human. Um, and, and yeah.
Well, I think one of the things, just again, listening to this idea of like no one, the majority of people don't want to end up alone or don't want to end up
Mm-hmm,
rich and alone or whatever.
mm-hmm,
I feel very fortunate. I have a lot of people in my family that are still alive and that I'm able to look up to and even talk to. And my brother's 17 years older than me, and then my dad's around, and my grandfather's around. He's 95. And one of the exercises that I go through personally is when I'm their age, and there's a variety of ages, and they will continue to be older than me. What would I say in looking back at present day Adam? Like, am I doing things that I would say, hey, I'm really glad that you started your own business when you were 27 and didn't wait to be 37? Or hey, like I'm really glad that instead of twiddling your thumbs, you started your podcast in 2017 instead of saying, well, I've never done this before and I'm not qualified to do it, and then just like let it go. And like the list goes on. And like,
mm-hmm.
what are the things that I will be grateful for? And it's a little bit of a guessing game, but at the same time, I think at our core, we know what really would bring us energy or bring us a version of happiness, whatever that is for someone.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, like if you even so, like you think about your family circle, you think about these relationships, you talked about PayPal Mafia, right? You know, these people knew each other before, like they're friends. Like there's no such thing as a self-made individual. Like
except for
you
Kendall
can't
Jenner.
accomplish. Yeah, except for Kendall, like and the nice family structure that she has behind it, right? So it's like we get things done together with each other. And so, like as an investor, we also talked about entrepreneurship. Like, yes, it's important to have a diversity of skill sets on your team that's super talented, but the investors are going to ask you how you all know each other. And if you look at a lot of the the answers during pitches, it'll be like, oh, we went to college together. But if you fast forward in the future, if more and more people are getting their skill sets outside of college, how are they building these relationships that are going to be extremely important to them as they inevitably build things on their own or with other people that they grew up with in this new environment,
Yeah, yeah.
right? And so that's why inside of Career Karma, we're not just matching people to coding boot camps. We put them into groups of 5 to 20 people that are like them, that are at their level, one step above
Call
them,
them
and
squads.
we call them squads. Exactly. Exactly. So we really build really tight relationships. And it actually comes from me and my co-founders knowing each other for a long period of time. And like, it's been like 6, 7 years now.
One of the things that we say at the Kadar Group is relationships precede results.
Mm,
And
mm,
I
I
think
like that.
it's such a great, for me, it's such a great articulation. It's very simple, it's distilled, and it totally, I see it everywhere.
Mm-hmm,
If you have that
mm-hmm,
relationship, if you have that trust, if you have, that understanding with the people around you, the ability for you to achieve results that you actually can't even imagine, the foundation is
mm-hmm,
there.
mm-hmm.
If it's backbiting, we just met, I don't know you, we come from different places, let's just get this done to make a quick buck. Like you may as well be running with your shoelaces tied. Like
Yeah.
you're not
And
gonna
I
get
think,
far.
yeah, I mean, like you could have the most brilliant minds working together, but if there is no chemistry, the team is almost worthless, right? Like they're just gonna clash. Like you want to get to the point where you can throw the ball down the court without even looking, and you know that somebody's gonna catch it,
Yeah.
right? You got to be able to look at the other individual without saying a word, and they'll understand you. right?
Yeah.
Because your nonverbal communication is so strong, right? And what's nice about the age that we're in is we're not just connecting people online. We're using the internet to connect with each other in person. People are getting married through dating apps. People are like, you know, finding tutors online. They're finding co-founders online. They're finding all kinds of things. Like they're finding some of their best friends through playing video games, right? So it's like if this is type of stuff is happening, you know, we are social people. And you usually get your best friends through the acquisition of skills that are difficult together. And I really like the piece about like relationships precede results. That's really, really good.
Hi, all. Quick break to tell you about the Founder's Mind Plus. It's all the interviews of guests you love, plus bonus episodes with additional stories and anecdotes, shoutouts in future episodes of Founding Funders, that could be you, and opportunities to get some cool swag from the show. You can upgrade by following the link in the show notes or go to thefoundersmind.com/plus. Thanks for following along. Back to the show. I think this kind of like leads right into sort of how we connected. I mean, like, I think we might have followed each other on Twitter, and then there was a LinkedIn connection, and then, life happens. And then you already mentioned, the income share agreements, and Antonio was on your show, Antonio was on my show, and there was this like digital tangential connection that pointed us towards each other. And after a quick conversation, right, we all of a sudden discovered, man, we might have passed each other on the streets of Chicago.
Exactly. Like we go way back.
We might have been in the same building.
Non-verbal energy interaction that we just stay in touch non-verbally, digitally now in person, kind of.
I feel like I have a love-hate relationship with social. So looking at your Twitter and your LinkedIn, and I was doing some reading about Career Karma. I mean, like, you've really leaned into that digital world in a way that seems to be that's working really well for you. I have a love-hate relationship with social because I think, and it kind of similar to gaming, it's really easy to get distracted with the story of gaming or on social media with just like the act of being on social media. But there are these silver linings. And with social, and you already articulated a lot of it, you have this ability to manifest connections and relationships literally out of thin air.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
This is something that I've talked to college students about, to anyone that will listen, is that like if you look at some of these platforms that are out there, you have the ability to connect with people that you would never run into. And they can be incredible conversations. I mean, a lot of guests on my show have been people that I would never come into contact with, but because of Twitter and Instagram and even LinkedIn, I've been able to reach out to them or even like kind of orbit them socially with like liking, commenting, waiting for something to happen. And like, oh, like interesting. Let's have a conversation.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like I was a early Twitter user before there was any celebrities, before influencer was even a word. And I really saw the power in it. I wrote an article in college, just essentially like playing off of the theme of Gil Scott-Heron about the revolution will not be televised, and the power of citizen journalism. And there was like a little comic of someone doing something illegal in government or like oppressive in government, and then people watching and saying, "Stop or I'll tweet." Right. And so like it was just like really powerful image was like the power is in the individual. And now the media or the government, if they are playing foul, they don't have absolute power because individuals can actually speak truth and they can go viral. So it kind of like flipped the dynamics where like if I'm a company, I can't just walk all over my employees or I can't just treat customers badly because there could be repercussions because my customers or the media makes things go viral and there's attacks on me. On the flip side, that could be bad because, media, if you see a bunch of likes or retweets, you can make the innocent guilty and you could also make the guilty innocent. But if you teach people how to have a voice, there's a lot of power in that. And we learned that early on in our journey. We also leverage like what you said about like being able to DM people on Twitter and have this direct connection with individuals. But what we realize is that most people on Twitter don't tweet. And so if we can help people not just break into tech and have skills in tech, but also have a voice, it's extremely important because digital identity and digital presence is extremely important for individuals. And if you Google your name and nothing shows up, a lot of times people think that you're weird. And especially as you're trying to hire, and it's super important to figure that out. I don't think it's absolutely necessary, but it's definitely worth considering. And there's a world for anonymity, but the Twitter's powerful.
Yeah, I mean, outside of Ron Swanson, I think most people are online. I do think, and I would agree. I think that there's I'm loaded with sayings. Perception is reality. Not my saying. People have heard that for years.
Yes.
But even if there's a really good reason for you not to be on social, initially that perception becomes your reality. Now, if someone gets to know you and they discover that like you have this philosophy around your relationship to the digital world, and it's clearly well thought out, and it's just like that's who you are. Like Cal Newport is he wrote Deep Work, he wrote Digital Minimalism recently. He has a flip phone, and if you ask him how to get in touch with him, he's like, "Can you contact my publicist? I don't use anything," and that's it. He has a website. That's it. But like that's his thing. He's like the guy that doesn't have any social, and he's an author. He's a New York Times bestselling author. He doesn't do any of that. He's just like, no, I am not participating.
Yeah. I mean, to that point, my father's similar. Like my father has no social media. My father like still uses a beeper.
Beeper. Is he a doctor?
Yes, he's a doctor.
Okay.
And so for me to get in touch with my father, I have to beep him first, and then he calls me.
Now, does it go through? Does it work?
Oh, it works. Oh, right. Like I beep him, and usually within a minute or two, I have a call if he's not busy or with the patient or something. Yeah. My father's an oncologist. My mother's a psychologist. And
you're a technologist.
And I'm a artist.
Artist.
Right?
Okay.
I don't even know how to define myself. There's no box.
Yeah.
And so when you think
you're
about
Ruben.
I'm Ruben Harris.
Yeah.
And like, but what's interesting about like, it's like people are, once you've accomplished a bunch of different things, you can abort technology and be like, you know what? I'm going on a digital fast. I'm going to delegate all my tasks to my chief of staff. I'm going to be Mark Andreessen, stop tweeting, which you can do. And like being disconnected becomes a luxury. And I think you should introduce some elements of that. But I think like as you're coming up, it's very important to be visible in some way. That doesn't always have to be digitally, doesn't always have to be loud, but you have to be visible and like make your presence known and like let your light shine. And it sounds super weird, but especially for introverts, but it's real.
I think, do you, just listening to sort of that commentary, do you think that being digitally disconnected is a privilege? Like if we start talking about privileges, around like wealth and like class, like is that a privilege that people develop or earn?
Yes and no, right? So like half the world is not online right now still. So I think there's definitely some people that want to be online, right? Because I would argue having a smartphone that's connected to the internet is more valuable than a car, a home, even like all kinds of other things. Going to school, because you have access to all these things, right? It's like,
I mean, you can learn and then make money.
Yes, exactly. It's way more valuable than a lot of other things. So like on one hand, having access to broadband internet, even being able to sit in a Starbucks is a huge privilege. On the flip side, I do think that it's also a huge privilege to be able to disconnect and still survive in today's digitally connected society, right? So it's both. The answer is both. and so like, I think that similar to like, whenever more and more people have something, then the more the people that have more the more the more the elites want to do something different, right? So like if all like I think I was listening to the Ball podcast where he talks a lot about like signaling, right? So like if you live in San Francisco, there's more dogs than kids. Naval didn't say this, but like in San Francisco, there's more dogs than kids. But if you want to demonstrate that you are rich in San Francisco, have kids and live in the city. Like now you know that you're rich, right? And like don't buy a Tesla like you can buy a Lambo because Tesla, like even though it's a nice elite high quality car, everybody has it, and arguably it has some of the best functionality versus some of the more elite cars. But you're only paying up for some of the other cars just to show that you have more money than other people, right? And so if you're gonna go to the wilderness, you could just go to somewhere local in the Bay Area, like a secret beach nearby in Pacifica, or you can pay somebody to take you to the wilderness and pay tens of thousands of dollars and go on a meditation retreat, and like that's your like your Burning Man trip, right? I'm not taking shots at Burning
Yeah,
Man,
for
right?
sure, for sure.
But just I think just in general, the answer is both.
Yeah, I mean, I find it really interesting. There's this like pendulum swing in a lot of directions. So like digital minimalism with Cal Newport, Andreessen not tweeting,
Mm-hmm,
you know, these wellness retreats where people go out and they get away from
mm-hmm,
everything. But I also think that like everything that we're doing is so new, right? Like
yeah,
our relationship with
yeah.
technology is so new and it's so young. Like it's
Mm-hmm,
evolved from when it started, but it's
mm-hmm.
also like 30 to 50 years is not a long time.
At all, at all.
In
That
history of
like,
humanity, it's like literally it's smaller than a millisecond.
dude, the App Store was invented in 2008.
Yeah.
Right? Like software engineers creating apps haven't existed for like a little over 10 years. It's actually pretty crazy.
It's ridiculous. Really quick anecdote. Did you hear the story, or are you familiar with the story about Mark Bainoff and the App Store and Steve Jobs?
No, tell the story. Gotta
This
hear
blew my mind. It was like a 2 minute video on Twitter, and I just watched. And it was like my mind melted.
Send it after.
Yeah. Steve Jobs was one of Mark Bainoff's mentors, and they would talk, and you know the sort of um, the walks that Steve Jobs would take with people, you know, obviously through his neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
And Mark Bainoff was talking about Salesforce and like building like this whole platform. And Steve Jobs said, you know, something about building like an ecosystem for it. And Mark Bainoff took that idea, registered, trademarked, like App Store, bought appstore.com, like did all this stuff. But then internal tests, they ended up calling it whatever it's called now. I don't know what it's called now, but they didn't go
The
with
Force Exchange.
yeah, Salesforce Exchange or whatever. They didn't end up going with App Store. And then like 12 months later, Steve Jobs gets on stage and is like, we're calling it the App Store. And Mark Bainoff goes to him and just gives him, he's like, you know, like he was so appreciative of all the work that and support that Steve Jobs gave him that he's like, I have a gift for you. And Steve Jobs is like, what could you possibly give me? And he's like, the trademark for App Store and appstore.com and like all this stuff.
That's amazing.
Isn't that ridiculous?
I love that. I love that. And I love that they're friends, right? Because
Yeah.
it goes back to relationships,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And Silicon Valley is driven by that. Like people starting companies, people hiring each other, people funding each other, giving each other the shot to pursue their dreams. I think that's an amazing story.
I think, and kind of circling back to this relationship piece, I think that's one of the things that any community can start to focus on. But like building relationships and adding value to people that you're connected with is actually free.
Like, I love the way that you like building relationships and adding value to people is free.
Yeah, it's free.
And it's super powerful.
Yeah. And people like, you know, like I talk about, I try and acknowledge and sort of like just call out my privilege and the life that I've had, you know, wherever I'm able. And there are really obvious layers of privilege that I have. Like I'm a straight white dude, right? And then there are the less obvious ones until you talk to me that like I grew up in like a upper middle class neighborhood. And then you start looking at the schools I went to. And what's really interesting, and I think about this, is like building relationships and fostering connections is kind of baked into a lot of my life and a lot of the people's lives that had similar upbringings as me, right? Oh, like you went to
Yep.
this school, even Montessori, like the Montessori Mafia. They're like, oh,
Yeah.
we have a shared connection, which means we understand each
Hmm.
other, and we're gonna help
Exactly.
each other out. And it goes all the way up. You
Yeah.
talk earlier, you were talking about how it's not really going to be about what colleges you went to, and that's not where co-founders are going to be found. But that's such a huge thing now, right? When we talk about like
Hmm.
the elite schools, oh, you went to Harvard, I went to Harvard, my dad went to Harvard. Like, let's have a conversation, you know, based on literally nothing,
Hmm. Or it
except
might
for
be like
that.
a very exclusive sport. Like it might be like not exclusive. It might be like lacrosse or
Yeah,
polo,
yeah,
right? Or something like that, right? So like these different points of connection. And I think it's important not just for people like straight white male, right? People is like, oh, I got to call it my privilege, but like, I didn't grow up in the hood. I need to call myself. I didn't grow up in the
for
hood. I
sure,
played cello. I grew up in Atlanta.
for
Like I
sure,
had
for sure.
musicians, and like a lot of times people, it's not necessarily about calling it out like it's a negative thing. It's more like acknowledging what the different things
Oh, for
are,
sure.
having these different points of contact, figuring out how we can share. Because like growing up in the hood has a lot of positives too. It's not all negative. Like you learn how to be scrappy despite limited resources. The people sometimes poor people are happier than rich people, right?
Actually, a lot of time,
Sometimes
a
you
lot of
get
times.
yeah, yeah. And so there's like all kinds of like growing up in very rich cultures, the type of food that you eat, like the stories that you tell, the music that you're exposed to. So like understanding your advantages, disadvantages, perceived advantages, like really understanding that and figuring out how to introduce that into relationships is what makes life beautiful.
I think those distinctions are amazing, and
Yeah.
just I think to like add on to me calling out privilege. Like for me, it's about there are things that I can't hide behind, and we
Mm-hmm.
talk about this like you and me walking on the street, people
Mm-hmm.
there are different reactions, and it's not
For
just
sure.
because you got like
Absolutely.
little shaves in your eyebrow there, like, which I
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. Yeah.
so like there are like the complete stereotypical things around privilege, and then there are the absolute like iceberg depth of
Mm-hmm.
layers, right?
I like the way you phrase that.
And I think one of the
Mm-hmm.
things that I think about and that I end up talking to people about or anyone that'll listen is how are you leveraging your privilege, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
it
Mm-hmm.
so to what you're talking about, it could be that you have the privilege of an unbelievable perspective on the world and community that someone else who seems like they have all of the textbook privilege in the world cannot touch. So what are you
Mm-hmm.
doing to
Mm-hmm.
leverage that to help them? And same with me, what am I doing? And there's perceived privilege and actual privilege. Like the communities I grew up in is you can't see it, but it's there for me.
Well, what I love about what you said related to iceberg depth is that a lot of times when people are reinventing themselves, they leave behind what they used to do or they're ashamed of what they used to do. But if you carry that with you, there's a lot of power there, right? If I'm trying to get a job as a junior engineer, but I was like a former musician applying to Patreon, now I'm suddenly interested, even though I don't have that many years of
For
experience
sure.
as a software
Yeah,
engineer,
yeah.
right? If I don't know, if I have a sports background, I used to play basketball, and I'm applying for a engineering role at the NBA as a junior engineer. Now I have a lot of value, right? So like understanding all the different things that you're bringing with you are super key. And I think that people talk about stereotypes a lot. And I think that anybody that says they don't stereotype is lying to themselves. I think that like you're people are going to have a reaction when they see the other person or when they read the
Whatever. Yeah,
resume, when
yeah,
they
yeah.
look at the portfolio. What I think is flawed is to jump to a conclusion based off of that initial um, initial impression and recognize that we are all icebergs and we all have layers and there's way more than what's on the surface and that's just a leading indicator, but it's not a conclusion.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I think that stereotypes for me are an outcome of bias. And, we have a lot of bias. And there's bias that we inherit and it can be generational. And there's bias that we take on just by like existing in whatever communities we live in. And breaking through that and at least creating internal structures personally to check that bias. Be like, oh, like why is that coming to my mind?
Yeah.
You
I mean,
know?
like, before breaking into startups, I had to break into Wall Street. Right. So, like, I had to figure out how to communicate why Chalice wants to be an investment banker. And it took me a while to refine that story. And I'll spare you that right now. But what I realized is that all the resumes look the same. So going back to icebergs, all you see is the surface, the great GPA, the great school, the internship, blah, the chess club, blah, blah. So how do you differentiate
You had
yourself?
chess on yours.
I had chess on mine.
Okay.
I didn't have the great GPA though.
I don't have that either, but I didn't
I,
have a GPA anyways. I just started my own company.
I was kind of like, I was like, delete this GPA and just like, let's put the school, put the education at the bottom. Anyway, but essentially what I realized is that if you show how someone got there and who helped them along the way, it tells a very different story. Like if I know that you're a first generation college student or that blah, blah, like there's different stories that people have about how they got to a certain place. And that story is actually what's going to set you apart because people don't just want to hire you for your abilities when you graduate from a coding boot camp. They want to work with you for long periods of time. They want to like you. And when you're interviewing with people, don't just talk about yourself. Get them to talk about themselves. People love talking about themselves.
Yeah, that's like the most underutilized interviewing strategy. Go with thoughtful, meaningful questions. And on the even deeper, like you're interviewing them, you don't want to end up in a shitty job with a shitty team.
Exactly.
I mean, like
exactly.
You definitely can't do your best work there.
Exactly.
One of the things,
which goes back to relationships.
It does. Hey, but what you were just talking about is something that I think about a lot, which is like, what are your transferable skills? Which
I love it.
Which I think about like with my work, and like I went from working in Apple retail to working at a startup to working in the leadership space. But every time I worked very briefly at The Onion, and every time I was like moving from one thing to another, I said, what are all the skills I can leverage at this company or at this role that at least like that I add as much value? And while I'm there, I'm picking up the things that I want to be doing to then move into coaching or to move into, business development.
This is a big key right here. I have not thought deeply about transferable skills, but I really love that you brought this up. It makes me think about like portable benefits. Immediately I was like portable benefits and the economy. Because like people want to carry their benefits as they go from job to job to job. But transferable skills, like people always talk about soft skills or power skills or things like that. But like there are similarities to the things that you do, and there's different skills that you learn that are consistent over time. What do you think are the main like transferable skills that people should be focused on, or like maybe not should be focused on, but like for you, like what are your most transferable skills over your lifetime in becoming an entrepreneur?
For me?
Yeah.
Okay. Am I on the
I know.
Am I on the Breaking Into Startups podcast now?
I know, I kind of flipped it.
I mean, like, so I think part of it is, you talked about earlier, when you talk about like, what are the things that you're really passionate about, or what are the things you're really good at, or what are the things that you really care about? And I think that starts to pull you into what are those transferable skills that you have, like that they show up no matter where you are, So like one thing that I've always had, at least within my jobs, I've always gotten the feedback. I'm very positive. I'm very approachable. I speak in analogies. So like if I learn something complex, I tend to speak in an analogy back to someone or to other people, I think, which is one of the reasons why coaching really jumped out for me. But I think also, and this goes to some of the skills that you've talked about, I don't really think that there is a problem that can't be solved. There are just a lot of problems that haven't been solved. And that's applicable anywhere I go.
Repeat that one more time.
I don't think that there are problems that can't be solved. I just think that there are problems that haven't been solved.
Nice.
Like it's a soft distinction, but it leaves the door open to say, well, what haven't we tried? Or maybe I've exhausted what I can imagine myself, and bringing someone who has completely different experience and maybe has never seen this thing before, maybe even someone that's only played cello all the way through college, and to say, what do you see here? And like all of a sudden there's this like epiphany. So, I mean, I think for me, the transferable skills are like around approachability, relationship building, positivity, and just like learning, knowing that,
Yeah.
I can learn something and then apply it, and
Yeah.
I talk to a lot of, when I talk to college students, we talk about transferable skills a lot because they often don't have a huge set of work experience,
Hmm.
right? So maybe they have some internships, maybe they have some small jobs, but like, especially, and I've volunteer career coach at DC public schools, and I've spoken at a university here in DC called Trinity University, which is at the moment,
Hmm. Trinity.
yeah, majority women, like 92%, and majority women of color, and they're
Hmm.
coming out of communities that are traditionally not supported, but they
Hmm.
have unbelievable skills,
Hmm.
around how they
Hmm.
take care of their extended family, how they're the first gen in college, the
Hmm.
mountain that they had to climb to get to where they are today. I didn't have to climb that
Hmm.
mountain, so I don't have those
Hmm.
skills, that I can apply to a
Hmm. Hmm.
job.
Yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
digging into that is really interesting. Whether you're 50 years old and you've committed yourself to a career that you want to get out of, you have immense amount of skills that you might be able to bring to another field, or you're 18, 19, 20, and you're like, but I never had a job. It's like, well, what are the things you've done in your life? Have you cared for someone? Have you earned money for something, for someone? Have you volunteered? Like, what are the things that you've done?
Hmm. Hmm.
Have you not
Hmm.
quit? Right? The mere fact that you didn't quit makes you a huge asset.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, I love those traits. I'm going to think deeply about that. And I think that's actually elements, like things that we should have people going through Career Karma to think of earlier. So you've added something that I'm going to start talking to our community about.
I love that, and
You're really good. You're really good to talk to. Like you help expand the mind. So it's good. Shout out the founder's mind.
good, good. I appreciate that, and I'm always, I'm always open to have conversations, and whether it's supporting
Hmm.
you or supporting the communities that you work in, I think we're just this is our vortex today, is the relationships,
Hmm.
but you just never know what's behind your next conversation. So I'm always open to
Hmm.
conversations.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
we took this conversation on like this 50-minute adventure around just like music and
Hmm.
relationships and like
Hmm.
introspection and
Yeah.
who am I. We didn't even talk that much
Hmm.
about career karma or what you're up to.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think for this conversation, a great place to stop would just be like, how can people, they listen to this episode and say,
Hmm.
damn, I need to hear more from Ruben, or damn, I
Hmm.
need to learn more
Hmm.
about career karma. Where should they go?
Yeah.
What's the best way to follow or engage?
The best way to follow or engage is to download the Career Karma app and send me a message and I will respond to it. So literally that's all they have to do. Or you should just go to Twitter, which is twitter.com/Ruben Harris. Or you could just go to our website, which is careerkarma.com. And then we also have a podcast and we have hundreds of hours of episodes on the Breaking into Startups podcast, which will give a lot of insight there. But I actually love that we did this 50-minute tour of, music and relationships and who we are and transferable skills, because Career Karma is a community. It's a support system for people. We're essentially helping people manage their own psychology. We are a career GPS system for individuals. Um, and our North Star is to help people make their most important career decisions. So today, we're helping them decide which coding bootcamp is for them. Tomorrow, we're going to help them make their most important career decisions of their life. And then once we solve the career problems, maybe we'll move on to helping them make their most important life decisions. So there we are.
Boom, boom. Ruben, I really
Awesome.
appreciate having you on the show, and you not only sharing your own experience and wisdom, but teasing a little bit out of me. So
I had to. But
appreciate it.
I didn't think about it intentionally. It's kind of like it just happened.
There we go.
But thank you for having me.
Thanks, man. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Founder's Mind. Check back weekly for full episodes. If you like what you're hearing, sign up for the Founders Mind Plus for 2 to 4 bonus episodes each month in addition to the full episodes and other dope benefits. Sign up for the Founders Mind Plus through the episode notes or by going to thefoundersmind.com and clicking the plus link. To make sure you don't miss any awesome wisdom from guests and stay up to date on the most recent episodes of the show, be sure to visit thefoundersmind.com. You can also follow along on social at thefoundersmind. Last but not least, thank you to Roy Matz for the music on this show and his dope editing skills that make the Founders Mind possible. Until next time, take care.
In the world, going through all of this insanity and try to bring new ideas, make them a reality. Illuminate in the thoughts, make it a priority to implement what you learn. What you get is what you be. In a world full of noise, hard to find that clarity to try to lead subtly, never full of vanity, and try to change something small or try to change humanity. Power forward through the dark, Founder's Mind is what you see. Founder's Mind is what you see. Founder's Mind is what you see.